Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. Defendant Kyle Rittenhouse takes the stand.
On August 25th of 2020, did you come to downtown Kenosha to look for trouble?
No.
The man accused of murdering two men and injuring another breaks down while testifying.
There were 3 people right there.
Plus, hear the heated exchange between the judge and the prosecutor and the trial and the death of Ahmaud Arbery.
What has happened in this case is a lynching in the 21st century.
We're live in Georgia with the latest developments in the trial. Later, abused and tortured members of the Turpin family speak out for the first time.
The only word I know to call it is hell.
Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. And welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Michael Bryant, in for Brian Buckmeyer, who is in Georgia covering the Ahmaud Arbery case. We'll hear from him soon. Also here, of course, co-host Terry Austin is with me. And we begin with news out of Wisconsin, as defendant Kyle Rittenhouse takes the stand, telling the jury why he felt the need to shoot 3 men in Kenosha, killing 2 of them. Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy is here with the dramatic moments from Rittenhouse's testimony. Anjanette.
Michael, Kyle Rittenhouse told the jurors that he worked in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and on the night of August 25th, 2020, he met up with friends as they went to guard some properties during the unrest there. Now, Rittenhouse told the jurors also that he was a police explorer and a firefighter EMT cadet with first aid training. He also worked as a lifeguard. He told some people that night he was an EMT, but that turns out to not be true. He described what happened in the moment leading up to his shooting of Joseph Rosenbaum, whom he said had threatened to kill him and others, threatening to cut out their hearts. He also described shooting Anthony Huber and Gage Grosskreutz. Rittenhouse broke down while answering a question about what happened when he shot Rosenbaum.
Once I take that step back, I look over my shoulder and Mr. Rosenbaum was now running from my right side, and I was cornered from in front of me with Mr. Zeminski, and there were there were 3 people right there.
Take a deep breath, Kyle. That's what That's what I run.
We're going to just take time for our break anyway.
Everybody that you shot at that night, you intended to kill, correct?
I didn't intend to kill them. I intended to stop the people who were attacking me.
By killing them?
I did what I had to do to stop the person who was attacking me.
Now, under cross-examination, Assistant Prosecutor Thomas Binger suggested that Rittenhouse has had quite a bit of time to get his story straight, which prompted an objection from the defense and a stern warning from Judge Bruce Schroeder.
You've also had the opportunity to listen to the testimony of all 30-some witnesses that have testified in this trial so far, correct?
Yes.
And after all of that, now you are telling us your side of the story, correct?
Correct.
He's commenting on my client's right to remain silent.
No, Your Honor. I am making the point that after hearing everything in the case, now he's tailoring his story to what has already been introduced.
The problem is, this is a grave constitutional violation for you to talk about the defendant's silence. And that is, and you're right. You're right on the borderline, and you may be over, but it better stop.
And that wasn't the end of the warnings from Judge Schroeder. He scolded Binger again for trying to bring up the comments that Rittenhouse had made a couple of weeks prior to this shooting, in which he said he wished he had had his AR-15 as he was watching looters at a pharmacy.
Mr. Richards absolutely correctly points out that just hours ago, I said I had heard nothing in this trial to change any of my rulings. So why?
Testimony, Your Honor.
Pardon me?
That was before the defense
Don't
testimony.
get brazen with me. You knew very well. You know very well that an attorney can't go into these types of areas when the judge has already ruled without asking outside the presence of the jury to do so. So don't give me that.
Now, the cross-examination continued well after the lunch break for several hours, and the prosecution played a number of videos from that night and suggested and tried to get Rittenhouse to admit that he really had no reason to fear for his life that evening and no reason to use a gun to guard property. Michael?
Boy, what a wild day in court there, Anjanette. Thank you. We're joined now by co-host Terry Austin, also criminal defense attorney Julie Rendelman. Julie, let me start with you. Kyle Rittenhouse, we saw him. He broke down on the stand. Are you buying it? Do you think that was sincere emotion?
God, I hate being asked those questions because I'm always so skeptical. I mean, look, there's some people that viewed it and said it was amazing how quickly he stopped crying once the jury left the room. Look, he's what, 18, 19 now? I can only imagine that there must be incredible emotion getting on the stand for the first time and talking about something, you know, that he did that is so incredibly horrific. I didn't see tears. I don't know that everyone cries and has tears. I'm trying to be as open-minded as possible. Certainly, I believed many of the things he was saying. As to whether he was sincere with his tears, I'm just not sure. I guess the jury will have to decide.
That's exactly right. It was a moment, that's for sure. And Terry, there was another moment or two when the judge was yelling at the prosecution several times, not what you want to feel and see and be part of if you're in the courthouse. How do you think the judge handled the situation?
Actually, Michael, I thought initially the judge was fairly even-handed. He does have this odd way of explaining objections to the jury. But then when he started yelling at Binger, I thought it was over the top. There was actually one point, we heard it there, where he basically said, "Don't be brazen with me," when Binger was trying to explain the basis of why he was doing this line of questioning. And then I thought that, you know, at another point, the judge actually said, "I'm not buying it. You're not acting in good faith." Essentially, he is telling that attorney, "You are lying." And frankly, whether you agree with the line of questioning or not, he was trying to give a good faith basis for why he was going down that path. And if, in fact, the judge thought it should be a mistrial, he can say that. But I think to yell and scream from the bench is really showing some bias. Thank God it wasn't in front of the jury.
Yeah, he did get close, I'll tell you that. And Jeanette, it appeared that Kyle Rittenhouse did have some support there. We saw his mom crying when he was so emotional.
Yeah, and you saw her there. As he started to break down, she was crying quite a bit. There was a woman there with her arm around her, comforting her in the courtroom, and she cried a number of times throughout the day as her son testified. Even when he would start to break down later in the day, she became very upset as well, and she has raised a great deal of money for him online to pay for his defense.
Well, quite the drama in court today. Thanks, guys. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, the fast-paced trial of Wisconsin versus Kyle Rittenhouse continues. What shocking motion the defense made midday today, and how that could affect the rest of the trial. All of that and more coming up next.
It was the video that shocked the nation. An unarmed black jogger, 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery, gunned down in broad daylight.
We are going to make sure that we find justice in this case.
The three men charged will now stand trial.
I told him stop till he hit me. I had nothing to do. There's nothing else I can do.
Well, you're a passerby coming through?
Nah, not necessarily.
That's my son that shot him. I was in the back of the truck.
Starting October 18th, watch live gavel-to-gavel coverage on the Law and Crime Network.
And welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. We continue our coverage in Wisconsin in the murder trial of Kyle Rittenhouse. A shocking turn of events today. The defense moving for a mistrial. All eyes, of course, on Kenosha today because Kyle Rittenhouse took the stand. After he broke down during the defense direct questioning, cross-examination got heated when Assistant District Attorney Thomas Binger continued to press Rittenhouse with questions pointing out the defendant had chosen to remain silent after his arrest. And at a midday defense motion for mistrial, he cited Binger's repeated efforts to bring up comments Rittenhouse made several weeks before the shootings.
The defense is going to be making a motion for a mistrial. What has happened in this morning was two times. The state had commented on Mr. Rittenhouse's right to remain silent. The first time he was admonished by the court. The second time, the court had the jury leave and re-admonished him on that.
Binger then fired back, saying the questions are fair game because Rittenhouse made comments to the press ahead of the trial.
The defendant has presented interviews to at least one media source and at least one online source since his arrest. And there have been questions about that night. There have been questions about what he did, things like that. He has decided, probably on advice of counsel in those certain circumstances, not to give a statement in the media about what happened. But he is talking about his family life, he's talking about his friends, he's talking about the circumstances of the case, he's talking about how this has affected him and things like that.
So, Terry, the defense makes a motion for this mistrial really based on two grounds, two issues. So let me break this up. Let me have you guys tag team this. Start with you, Terry. Explain this first issue that the defendant's right to remain silent was challenged, basically.
Well, that's right. And the defense made that objection when the prosecution was asking Rittenhouse about the fact that, well, you are tailoring your testimony. And have you spoken about this before? It's the first time you've talked about this in this way. And ultimately, the judge yelled at Binger again and said that this is a constitutional violation. And even if it is, the issue here for me was the way the judge spoke to Binger. I thought that he basically told him that he was supporting the grounds for mistrial. He didn't call a mistrial, but he definitely said that this was something he thought he could do, and he was going to take it under advisement, basically.
Yeah, I felt like we were about to see a mistrial in real time there. Julie, the second issue was about Rittenhouse's prior bad act at the CVS. Explain that issue for us.
Yeah, so prior to the trial, the judge made rulings. There's certain pieces of evidence indicating bad acts on the part of Kyle Rittenhouse that weren't going to come in unless someone opened the door. And in this case, whether the defense opened the door. But here's the problem. If you want to bring it out as the prosecutor, you got to ask permission. And so what he did is he just did it on his own accord. He didn't ask the judge anything. And the judge said to him basically, A, the defense didn't open the door, and B, even if they had opened the door, you must ask for permission first. And so it felt like a bit underhanded on the part of the prosecution to bring out a bad act that he very well knew he needed a ruling from the judge first. And so that's why the judge got quite angry about that as well.
Yeah, and now it seems like the judge is a little sensitive to anything the prosecution does. Okay, stay put, folks. We'll talk again. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, after years of abuse, two members of the Turpin family break their silence in an exclusive interview. Plus, the trial for the death of Ahmaud Arbery. Our own Brian Buckmeyer is live in Glenn County, Georgia, for an inside look at Wednesday's court proceedings. All that and more after the break. And welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. We look now to Georgia, where the death of Ahmaud Arbery trial is underway. In February 2020, Arbery, an unarmed black man, was gunned down while running near his Brunswick, Georgia home. He died as a result of his injuries. Defendants Gregory and Travis McMichael and William Roddy Bryan face several charges in connection with his death, including malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault. Father and son Gregory and Travis McMichael tailed Arbery in their pickup truck as he ran. Travis McMichael eventually shot Arbery, claiming self-defense. Brian followed along in his own pickup truck and recorded the incident in this now famous viral video. After weeks of jury selection, opening statements began last Friday at the Glenn County Courthouse in Georgia, and our very own Brian Buckmeyer has been there since the beginning. He's live right now outside the courthouse. Brian, what is the latest in this contentious trial?
Michael, day 4 of the trial against William Bryant, Travis, and Greg McMichael for the death of Ahmaud Arbery saw more testimony of the facts leading up to the shooting and the investigation that followed. Matthew Albenze, the man who saw Ahmaud Arbery in Larry English's construction site, testified that prior to Ahmaud's death, English showed him a video of a person looking around and walking on his deck that looked like Ahmaud Arbery. And on the day of Ahmaud's death, he called the police, but not the 911 that he may have called, but instead he called a non-emergency number because he did not believe it was an emergency. An officer testified about the interview with William Bryant describing the chase of Ahmaud Arbery. Arbery's fingerprints and hand smudges were described as being on the sides of the truck, and Kevin Goff, the defense attorney for Bryant, got out that Bryant was distressed and unfocused during the investigation. During the lunch break, civil rights attorney Lee Merritt was joined by Benjamin Crump and Reverend Al Sharpton discussing the makeup of the jury, along with how it broke their heart to see officers check on the McMichaels as Arbery's body lay there dying.
Brian, obviously, we see there's some press conferences there today with Reverend Al Sharpton, with Ben Crump. What were the big takeaways?
The big takeaways were what the family was reacting to, as well as Al Sharpton when he first heard about this case, that both the McMichaels were around the scene of the crime, and people seem to be tending more to them than looking after Ahmaud Arbery. Benjamin Crump told us that he, along with Lee Merritt, are filing a civil rights claim against the county of Glenn and their police officers and the way in which they handled this case at the exception of the death of Ahmaud Arbery, as well as attorney Jackie Johnson, who's facing her own indictment charges.
Yeah, you know, now back inside the courtroom, you mentioned there was evidence of these smudges that were in William Roddy Bryant's car, and we hear Arbery's family had a big reaction to that. What did Ben Crump tell you?
Yeah, so I actually got to speak with Benjamin Crump one-on-one, and he was a little disgusted and said the family was as well, that when the defense attorney was trying to make the distinctions that these smudges or handprints were not on the front or back of William Bryant's vehicle, but merely on the side, that suggested that he did not cut off Ahmaud Arbery or did not try to run him over with the vehicle, trying to kind of soften the blow, so to speak, that Ahmaud Arbery was merely just, I don't know, glancing by the vehicle or wasn't seen in close proximity to the truck. Benjamin Crump, along with the family, kind of took that in a sour note and didn't really like how the defense was characterizing what they said was very obvious from the video.
Yeah, sometimes those efforts pay off, sometimes they backfire on you. Hey, Brian, thank you so much for the live report from Georgia. We appreciate it. Hey, when we come back, we're going to hear from the Turpin family survivors. For the first time since their rescue, 2 brave women speak out in an exclusive interview detailing the abuse they endured, all at the hands of their parents. That's next on Law and Crime Daily. And welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. We're now hearing for the first time from members of the Turpin family, siblings who were subjected to abuse and torture at the hands of their own parents. Back in 2018, 13 siblings were rescued from their California home after one sister escaped and made a 911 emergency call. The 17-year-old told dispatchers one of her sisters was chained to a bed and that she had not been bathed in more than a year. She also said her parents claimed the children attended a private school, but at 17 years old, she had completed only the first grade. At the time of their rescue, the siblings had been planning for an escape for more than 2 years. In 2019, parents David and Louise Turpin pled guilty to multiple charges, including torture and false imprisonment. They were both sentenced to life in prison. For the first time, 2 of the sisters tell their story in an exclusive ABC interview.
My whole body was shaking. I couldn't really dial 911 because, I'm sorry.
I don't know how you had the courage.
I think it was like us coming so close to death so many times.
People were chained for, what, months?
Yeah.
Months?
Yeah.
Unbearable.
Yeah. mother, she choked me, and I thought I was going to die.
The only word I know to call it is hell.
How are these folks even surviving at all? Julie, the Turpins were sentenced to 25 years to life. What are the chances they're ever going to get parole?
So I believe they're up for parole after 25 years. The question is, after 25 years, what's going to happen? I mean, you know, we think of murder cases and we wonder, is this equal to that? And I'd say it is. These are kids that were absolutely tortured for the most important times of their lives. They were literally stuck in this, as she described, hell. And so I think it's hard pressed for anybody, including those children, by the way, who are going to have a say as to whether or not these parents ever get out, are ever going to think it's appropriate to let them out of jail.
Yeah. You know, Terry, the Turpins argued that, hey, they love their children. And ultimately, they pled guilty to the 14 counts of torture, cruelty, and false imprisonment. So how are you squaring those two things?
You know, it's really hard to reconcile those two things. Torture in California is defined as intentionally inflicting great bodily harm, causing extreme pain. And cruelty and false imprisonment are also intentional crimes. So it's really difficult to understand how you can commit these intentional crimes and at the same time, you are saying you love your children. Either they are great liars, because those two things can't both be true, or in fact, perhaps there was some mental illness involved. We don't know whether or not that will be a factor as far as getting out for parole, but frankly, I don't see how you can reconcile those two statements because they are just complete opposites of each other. And frankly, in my opinion, they do deserve to be in jail for the rest of their life.
Yeah, very, very difficult situation. So thank you both. Julie Rendelman, criminal defense attorney, and co-host Terry Austin. Thank you both. Thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We will see you next time as we discuss justice in America.